the Yamasee were already here. Then he began to give the history. 1. Nergal and Neerta actually detonated the bombs that destroyed Mesopotamia during another time when the Anunnaki were fighting. And one of their wives almost died during this period as the Anunnaki left the planet during this time, and the effect was like nuclear radiation. Enki and Marduk were in Africa, and Marduk was actually under Amun. Enki had African wives. Enki and Marduk became so closely associated that they became one. At that time, everything was equal on the planet. Enki and Enlil began to war, and that became the conflict of the gods. They wiped out all of Samaria. As stated before, they became so closely associated that they became one. With the war going on with the two brothers, the land shook, and the weight changed or shifted, and the land itself broke up into parts. Before that, it was one landmass. The parts were northeastern Africa and Yew Island, which is where the name York came from. Arabia, India, Australia, and New Zealand. These are the parts that broke up, one being York Island, or Yew Island. 2, you have the Black Sea all over the place. You have the Black Sea all over the place. Who lived in Australia and Asia? Hushin and Xinghu of China came to America, to California, and mixed in with the indigenous people there. 3, the Japanese went to South America in countries like Ecuador. That is why the people there are calling indigenous in South America or other countries that they look like Asians. 4, some years back, there was a big deal with DNA and tracing their ancestry. For instance, Oprah Winfrey discovered she is Liberian, although she went to help the young girls in South Africa. Then you don't really hear much about it, that you don't hear much about them tracing their ancestry. It started to die out. The problem was scientists began discovering a gene that they could not identify as African, or at least from the samples they had obtained from what is called Africa. This gene that they could not identify is the Anasazi, who were already indigenous people, us, in North America. The Asians mixed in and brought beadwork and pottery and added to the culture developed there. 5, you had the main dominant tribes such as the Toltecs, the Olmecs, Aztecs, and the Hopi, who were given the secret knowledge. In South America, the Anunnaki, Alelu, set up there when he was on Earth, and he is responsible for the large temples, he conducted experiments with DNA, and is the reason you see the different faces in the wall, stone, or the stone wall at Tiwanaku. They say the tone many different ways. You look it up in the encyclopedia, they don't even spell it. They spell it so many different ways, but it's Tiwanaku in Peru. Alelu also introduced flesh eating and the rituals of bloodletting of the Maya, and those that were sent out from the tribe and set up in Pohnpei, and Angkor Wat. So there was a new breed being, part black and Asian, with a variety of features in North America, who was tall, short, large almond eyes, small slanted eyes, and everything in between. You have Africans now with Oriental features and Asians with African features. The Anglo-Saxons and the Spaniards mixed in when they came over, so there was a shift. Remember, Columbus thought he was in India, and the Indians were dark before the European influence. As people migrated back and to other places, they became known as Indonesians. When they settled in Indonesia, because they were Indo, meaning Indian, and Nesian, meaning Asians. Indonesians, Indian Asians. Or became known as Malaysians, or Mali and Asia, Malaysia, Malaysians. Look at some of you. Look at some of your prominent people in Africa. Madam Sirleaf looks like a Native American. The genes tumble and show up after so many generations. We were Anasazi, and it wasn't until colonialism that we became known by the names they chose, like creeks, because we were near water. We were near the waters of the creeks, or near the water of the creeks. Thus, we were called Creek Indians. Or Yamasi, meaning kind or gentle. Africa is not what we called it. It means to divide. All the landmass was one. Why would we call it division or Africa? Moors is a name that they called us as well, meaning black. Yet it was only given to those who wore the fez. The Moors were those who helped the Arabs. Those who did not were called Nigra or Negroes. Both words mean the same thing, black. One is looked at with favor. It is okay to marry a Merino, which has Portuguese roots, yet not okay to marry a Negro, which has Latin roots. So they say, do not call yourself black. They are not seeing that they are falling out of one trap and into another. 6, we did not have problems getting along together. We built Atlantis and called it a vacation spot. It was called ATLAN because it was 2 parts, North and South America. And is dual. A-N means or is dual. In Greek, they add an S to the end of their words, so you have Atlantis. Who went on vacations? The Egyptians. They used to sail straight across. You are natural inhabitants of this continent. Do a comparison. You can find a person from South America, Peru, and Mexico who looks like an Asian. They were finding a different DNA strand, and that Negroes have alien blood, blood that they cannot find in Africans. So they moved to those that lived on the east coast of Africa and asked, who are these people? The Anasazi. As Anasazi, or Anasazi, we were under attack in North America from the Viking invaders, or the 6 kings, V1 kings, 6 Vikings, 6 kings. They were trying to wipe us out. So we had to learn how to live in pueblos, or pablos, which were structures made out of the cliffs of clay. There's a word, adobe. Okay, adobe or clay. Right. It's spelled A-D-O-B-E, adobe, or clay. They had no knowledge of building, so we were out of their reach. And once the Palladians came, their crafts could fly up into these dwellings, so we had to abandon our dwellings once that occurred. 7, there was a conflict with Enki and Enlil. Alelu gave Damkina to Enki. Enlil became jealous once he came down. Alelu rejected Enlil because he tried to kill Anu and take over rulership. He grabs his people and was sent to Mars and continued his experiments. Remember, the face on Mars, it was a marker letting beings come back and forth of the creation and know of the creation of this being. They have discovered man-made structures on Mars, such as pyramid structures, and the face on Mars. NASA is saying they have proof of an underground water system, although it is not active now, and even a stone figure of a woman. 8. On the other side of the Atlantic, Kankan Mansa Musa also came over to the Americas and actually went back and forth to Mali. Remember, before the continent split, it was the same piece of land. Once the landmass broke apart and separated, they would continue to sail back and forth. That's why if you check the flora and the fauna on that side of Africa with the piece that is on the opposite side in America, it has the same floral fauna. Kankan also came in contact with the Anasazi. After the Trail of Tears, the creeks were also removed and became known as Wapanu, W-A-P-A-N-U-U. Wapanu, hence Wu-Nuwapu. 9. The Marinos and Negroes, this word is actually the same. These words are actually the same. Marinos is from a Portuguese root, and Negroes is from a Latin root. Amongst them, it is said it is okay to marry a Marino or Marino, yet not okay to marry a Negro. When the mixed people returned to their homelands, they became known as Indonesians or Indian Asians. They became Mali Asians or Malaysians. For example, many natives moved to Liberia when President Monroe opened the door for people to go back to Africa. And that is the reason Liberia's capital is named Monrovia. 10. The wall is down, and the wall of respect and just accepting what they say to be true. There was a time when movies were all about life, people, things, and things that mattered. The minds now are only showing death, killing, violence, and a warped sense of reality in the so-called reality TV shows.
Can you spell what is it called? Anastasia? Anastasia, how you spell that word?
It's spelled A-N-A-S-A-Z-I.
That's how it
Anasazi.